old cowboy, Henry Cole, had lived alone on his wide, dusty ranch for more than 30 years, surrounded by nothing but open land, creaking fences, and memories that never seemed to fade. Every morning, just as the sun began to rise over the hills, he followed the same routine. He pulled on his worn boots, grabbed his hat, and walked slowly toward the ranch gate to check on his land. That morning seemed ordinary at first, with cool air and the smell of dry grass drifting through the wind. But as Henry drew closer to the gate, he noticed a large shadow sitting motionless near the wooden posts. His heart tightened. For a moment, he wondered if it was a wild animal or a sick calf that had wandered in overnight. When he came closer, he realized it was a dog, an enormous one. The dog's thick gray fur was dusty, its body powerful yet strangely still. It didn't growl or bark. Instead, it looked at Henry with deep, tired eyes that carried a quiet sadness. Henry felt an unexpected ache in his chest. He noticed a rope loosely tied to the dog's collar, and attached to it was a small, folded piece of paper. His hands shook slightly as he reached down. The dog didn't pull away. It simply sat there, calm and trusting, as if it had been waiting for him. As Henry held the note, a strange feeling washed over him, something between fear and hope. The morning sun climbed higher, but for Henry, time seemed to slow. He didn't know why, but he felt that this moment, this dog, this note was about to change his quiet, lonely life forever. Henry unfolded the note slowly, his rough fingers struggling with the thin paper as if it might break apart in his hands. He put on his old glasses, the same ones Martha used to tease him about, and began to read. The handwriting was uneven, pressed hard in some places and faint in others, like the writer had been crying or shaking. Please take care of him. His name is Bear. He is gentle, loyal, and brave. I can't keep him anymore. He deserves a home where he is loved. Henry read the words twice, then a third time, feeling each sentence sink deeper into his chest. His throat tightened and his vision blurred. He had read many letters in his life, bills, legal papers, condolences, but none had ever hit him like this. He looked down at the giant dog again. Bear lowered his head, ears slightly back, as if he understood he was being judged or abandoned all over again. Henry knelt with a groan from his tired knees and studied the dog's face. There was no aggression there, only patience and a quiet dignity. Memories rushed back without warning. His wife's gentle smile, his son's laughter running through these same fields years ago. After they were gone, the ranch had turned into a place of silence. Henry had told himself he preferred it that way, but the note in his hands proved how fragile that lie really was. A tear slipped down his cheek, surprising him. He hadn't cried in years. I know what it's like to lose everything, he murmured, more to himself than to the dog. Bear slowly leaned forward and rested his massive head near Henry's knee. Warm and steady, Henry let out a shaky breath and placed a hand on the dog's fur. In that quiet moment by the gate, two abandoned souls recognized each other, and something long broken inside the old cowboy began, gently to heal. From that day on, the rhythm of life at the ranch quietly changed. Bear stayed close to Henry, moving with surprising care for such a massive animal. In the mornings, he walked beside him as Henry checked the fences and counted the cattle, his heavy steps slow and respectful, as if he understood the old man's pace. When Henry stopped to rest, Bear sat nearby, always watching, always alert. The silence that once pressed down on the ranch no longer felt empty. It felt shared. Henry found himself talking aloud more often, commenting on the weather or complaining about his aching back, and Bear listened without judgment, his calm presence making the words feel less foolish. As the days passed, Henry began to notice things that made his heart ache. Beneath Bear's thick fur were old scars, some thin and white, others rough and uneven, telling stories of fights, protection, and pain. This was not a dog that had lived an easy life. While brushing Bear one evening on the porch, Henry traced one scar gently and shook his head. You've been through hell, haven't you, boy? He said softly. Bear responded by pressing closer, his tail thumping once against the wooden boards. The trust in that simple gesture struck Henry deeply. At night, Bear chose to sleep near the porch steps, facing the open land, never fully resting. More than once, Henry woke and looked out the window, seeing the dog's massive shape standing guard under the moonlight. It reminded him of the protector he once tried to be for his own family. Something stirred inside him, a sense of purpose he thought he had lost forever. For the first time in decades, Henry felt needed again. The ranch, once just a place to survive, slowly became a home filled with quiet companionship, and the old cowboy realized that Bear hadn't just been left at his gate by chance. The night the storm came, it arrived without mercy. Heavy clouds rolled in fast, swallowing the sky, and the wind howled across the open land like something alive. Henry was inside when he heard the distant panicked sounds of the cattle, followed by sharp yips cutting through the thunder. His heart dropped. Coyotes. He grabbed his jacket and reached for his rifle. But before he could step outside, Bear was already moving. The giant dog leapt off the porch and disappeared into the darkness, his powerful body swallowed by rain and wind. Henry stood frozen for a moment, rain soaking his clothes as fear twisted his stomach. Every flash of lightning lit up the field, and in the brief light, he could see shadows moving, hear snarls and frantic animal cries. Minutes felt like hours. He shouted Bear's name into the storm, his voice breaking, but the wind tore the sound away. Guilt flooded him. He had let the dog go, had trusted him to face danger alone. Then, through the rain, Bear emerged. His fur was caked with mud, and a thin line of blood ran down one leg. But his eyes were steady and fierce. Behind him, the field was quiet. The coyotes were gone. The cattle were safe. Henry dropped to his knees in the mud, his strength finally giving out. He wrapped his arms around Bear's massive neck, sobbing openly as thunder cracked overhead. "You saved everything," he whispered, his voice shaking. As Henry cleaned Bear's wound later by lantern light, his hands gentle and grateful, he finally understood the weight of the note. Whoever had left Bear at the gate hadn't abandoned him out of carelessness. They had trusted him to someone who would see his worth. In that storm-lit night, Henry realized the dog hadn't just protected the ranch. He had guarded the old cowboy's heart, giving him something precious to lose and, more importantly, something worth living for again. The morning sun was soft when a dusty car stopped at the ranch gate, breaking the peaceful routine Henry and Bear had settled into. Henry watched from the porch as a young woman stepped out, her movements hesitant, her eyes scanning the land as if she feared being turned away. Before Henry could say a word, Bear stiffened. His ears lifted, his body froze, and then a sound escaped him that Henry had never heard before. A low, trembling whine filled with recognition. In a flash, the giant dog ran to the gate. The woman dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she wrapped her arms around Bear's neck, burying her face in his thick fur. Through broken breaths, she introduced herself as Emily. She explained that Bear had belonged to her father, a soldier who had trained him as a guardian and companion. After her father's death, her life had fallen apart. With no home and no way to care for such a large dog, she had made the hardest decision of her life and left Bear at the ranch with a note, praying he would be safe. Henry listened quietly, his chest heavy but calm. He could see the love between them, deep and real. When Emily finally asked if she could take Bear back, Henry felt a sharp ache, but before he could answer, Bear made the choice himself. He walked slowly back to Henry and sat at his side, placing his massive paw on the old man's boot. Emily smiled through her tears, understanding. Henry knelt and hugged Bear, his voice thick with emotion. "You're home, boy," he said softly. Emily promised to visit, and as she drove away, Henry stood beside Bear, watching the dust settle. The ranch felt different now, not lonely, not empty. An old cowboy and a giant dog stood together, bound by loss, loyalty, and a love that had arrived in the most unexpected way.